You're not gonna believe what went down in this story. Imagine this. A quiet neighborhood, just another calm morning, until a full-blown SWAT truck rolls in. Not for a raid, not for an emergency, just parked there while officers handled official police business nearby. But of course, that wasn't okay with her. You know exactly the type. The self-appointed queen of the cul-de-sac. The rules are rules, HOA Karen. And in classic entitled fashion, she decided that even a SWAT truck wasn't above her power. She marched right up, phone in hand, not to thank them for their service, but to fine them. Yep, she tried to give a citation to a SWAT vehicle for blocking the road, as if it were a teenager's parked car at a barbecue. According to her, it was a clear violation of HOA policy. And she wasn't just angry, she was furious, ranting about how they were disrupting the peace and needed to move immediately or face consequences. But here's where things took a turn. The officers tried to stay calm, politely explaining they were handling a serious situation nearby. Still, she wouldn't back down. She pushed harder, yelling about authority, threatening lawsuits, even trying to physically block the officers from returning to the truck. That's when the energy shifted. The SWAT team had had enough. She wasn't just being loud anymore. She was interfering with law enforcement. And by the end of it all, well, let's just say she was the one being escorted away in handcuffs. So how did a woman go from handing out fake tickets to getting arrested in front of her neighbors? What exactly did she say that crossed the line? And what happened when the rest of the HOA found out? Stick around, because this story from the EntitledPeople subreddit is just getting started. So here's where things start to get even crazier. The woman, let's call her Linda, wasn't just your average neighbor with too much time on her hands. She was the head of the HOA board, the kind who memorizes every line in the handbook and believes she's basically the mayor of the neighborhood. People had already dealt with her petty citations before. Warnings for having a garden gnome that was too whimsical, or trash bins being out for more than 15 minutes after pickup. Classic HOA drama, right? But no one expected her to take it this far. The SWAT truck wasn't even blocking the road like she claimed. It was pulled slightly to the side, clearly marked, and had flashing lights going. Nothing unusual for an active police situation. But Linda saw red. According to some neighbors, she stormed out of her house in slippers, already on the phone with the HOA's legal counsel. She came out waving a clipboard, shouting about community standards and unauthorized vehicles. It wasn't just about a blocked road anymore. It was about control. She saw the officers as outsiders, people who didn't play by her rules. And that's when she made her biggest mistake. One officer calmly asked her to back away while they dealt with an ongoing issue in a nearby house, something that hadn't even been made public yet. But she refused. She kept yelling, filming them with her phone, and even tried to open the truck's door to leave the citation where they'd see it. That's when neighbors really started paying attention. People peeked through windows, phones came out. Everyone knew Linda liked drama, but this was a new level. And even then, she didn't stop. She doubled down, shouting that the SWAT team was intimidating residents and that she was going to file a report. But what she didn't realize was that she was becoming the emergency. As Linda kept yelling, the tension on the street was thick. The SWAT officers stayed calm, but you could tell they were getting fed up. One of them radioed in, quietly updating someone on the situation, while the others tried to keep her from interfering any further. The thing is, they weren't even there for her. There was an active investigation going on just 2 houses down, a potential warrant execution, and now they were being forced to deal with a woman arguing about HOA guidelines in the middle of it. Meanwhile, the neighbors had fully come out of their houses now. Some were recording the chaos. Others just stood in disbelief. Everyone knew Linda was strict, but this was turning into a neighborhood-wide embarrassment. A few people even tried to calm her down, telling her to go back inside. But of course, That only made her louder. She turned on them too, accusing them of not backing her up and being part of the problem. One neighbor, Sarah, who'd had her own run-ins with Linda in the past, like getting written up for her non-regulation flower pots, quietly told the officers she had a copy of Linda's latest HOA email, which oddly mentioned unauthorized vehicles near her property just a day before this all went down. Sarah said it almost felt like Linda had planned something, like she was just waiting for a moment to flex her HOA authority on someone big. Back at the SWAT truck, the lead officer was clearly trying to diffuse things without escalating, but Linda's behavior was pushing every boundary. She started throwing around legal jargon she clearly didn't understand, saying things like citizens' right to oversee public operations and claiming the truck was in violation of municipal code. But what no one knew yet, not even Linda, was that the incident down the block had just taken a serious turn, and the officers were now weighing whether her actions were putting everyone, including herself, in real danger. The air was thick with tension now. The officers' calm patience was running thin, and the neighbors could feel it. Linda, completely in her own world, kept ranting about violations, pacing near the SWAT truck like she owned the street. She even pulled out a printed copy of the HOA handbook, flipping to a section she claimed proved her point. One officer glanced at it, then looked back at his team like he couldn't believe this was happening in the middle of a real operation. The situation down the street was getting worse. The officers had received word that the suspect inside the house was refusing to come out, and things could turn dangerous any second. They were now preparing to fully gear up and focus on the real emergency, but Linda was still there, demanding names, badge numbers, and threatening to call the mayor. That's when one of the officers, trying to clear the area for safety, asked her one last time, firm but respectful, to step back and return to her property. She didn't. Instead, Linda walked right up to the SWAT truck again, this time trying to tape a formal notice to the windshield. That's when the officer had no choice but to physically block her path, not aggressively, just enough to keep her out of the danger zone. But she completely lost it, yelling that she was being assaulted, that her rights were being violated, and that this was a hostile takeover of the neighborhood. At that moment, backup units started arriving. More police vehicles, more officers. The street, once quiet, now looked like the scene of a major operation. Blue and red lights flashed across houses, sirens cut through the air. And yet, Linda still refused to move. She even shouted at one of the new officers that she was in charge here, not them. The neighbors stood frozen. Phones still recording, kids being pulled back inside by nervous parents. And right then, one of the officers got word over the radio. The suspect inside was making threats. And now, they had a second potential threat on the scene. Just when it seemed like things couldn't get any more chaotic, the second twist hit, and no one saw it coming. As officers positioned themselves to move in on the suspect's house, a call came through that changed everything. The person inside had spotted the commotion with Linda and was now using it as leverage, shouting through a window that he knew the police were distracted and threatening to do something drastic if they didn't leave. It turned out he'd been watching the whole incident unfold, from Linda's outburst to the arrival of backup, and now he was feeding off the chaos. The officers immediately realized they were dealing with more than just a routine warrant. This had become a potential hostage situation. The street went into lockdown mode. Officers began setting up a wider perimeter. Neighbors were told to stay inside, and the mood turned from confusion to real fear. And Linda? She was still completely unaware of how serious things had gotten. She kept shouting that this was over-policing, that she had every right to be there, and that if they laid another finger on her, she'd be calling her attorney. But what really set everyone off was what happened next. While police were trying to focus, Linda made a move toward one of the SWAT team's side compartments, trying to open it, maybe to inspect it, maybe to prove some bizarre point, but to the officers, that was it. That action could no longer be brushed off as harmless. She wasn't just being loud anymore. She was interfering with an active and dangerous standoff. One officer rushed over, pulling her away from the truck just as a new command was issued over the radio. "We have movement inside." The suspect was escalating, and now officers had to deal with a civilian not only refusing to leave the area, but potentially putting herself and others in harm's way. The neighbors watched in stunned silence. No one could believe what they were seeing. Linda had started with a citation, but now she'd officially become part of the crisis. At this point, everything was happening at once. Officers moved swiftly, positioning themselves behind vehicles and nearby fences, their focus locked on the suspect's house. A negotiator had arrived and was trying to de-escalate the situation from behind a shielded vehicle. And yet, in the middle of this high-stakes standoff, Linda was still arguing, still insisting that the SWAT team had no authority to be on her street without HOA approval. But then came the moment no one expected. The suspect inside suddenly surrendered. Just like that, he walked out with his hands up, responding to the negotiator's calm voice. It was over. The officers quickly restrained him, checked the house, and confirmed no one else was inside. The situation had been diffused, or so everyone thought. As the SWAT team turned their attention back to wrapping up and debriefing, Linda made one last stand. In front of everyone, she loudly declared that she was filing a complaint against the entire department for disturbing the peace. She even pulled out her phone again, filming herself like she was the hero of the story. That's when the lead officer calmly walked over and informed her that she was being detained, not arrested yet, but detained, for interfering in a police operation and attempting to access restricted equipment. The neighborhood fell into silence. No more shouting, no more arguing. Just the sight of Linda being escorted to the back of a squad car, still protesting, still insisting she had done nothing wrong. And here's the twist no one saw coming. Later that week, the HOA board held an emergency meeting. Turns out, this wasn't Linda's first incident involving power trips and questionable decisions. Several neighbors came forward with stories, emails, even video clips. The board voted unanimously to remove her from her position, and in a surprising turn, the very handbook she once weaponized was used against her. So yeah, the SWAT truck didn't get fined. But Linda? She lost a whole lot more than just her clipboard that day. After the chaos settled and Linda was released later that evening, the entire neighborhood was buzzing. The video clips from the day had already made their way online, especially in local Facebook groups and even on Reddit, where someone had shared it under our Entitled People with the caption, "HOA Karen tries to find a SWAT truck and gets detained." The comments blew up. People couldn't believe it was real. Back in the neighborhood, things felt quieter, calmer. For the first time in years, neighbors were actually talking to each other, sharing stories about past run-ins with Linda, laughing nervously about the garden gnome violations and trash bin warnings that now seemed absurd compared to what had just happened. Sarah, the neighbor who had stepped in earlier, was even being encouraged to run for the open HOA seat. People wanted someone level-headed, someone who wouldn't lose it over a police vehicle doing its job. As for Linda, she stayed quiet after that. No more patrols around the neighborhood with her clipboard. No more passive-aggressive HOA emails. The board's decision to remove her stuck, and a few weeks later, her house went up for sale. Some said she was embarrassed. Others said she still believed she was in the right. But either way, the street finally had peace again. The big takeaway? Power in the wrong hands. Even something as small as an HOA title can get real out of control. And sometimes, it takes a SWAT team and a clipboard showdown to wake everyone up. In the end, the road wasn't really blocked by the truck. It was blocked by someone who thought the rules were only for everyone else. And that's the wild story of the HOA Karen, the SWAT truck, and the day the neighborhood changed forever.